Hey, beautiful friend, it's Marnie. Welcome back to Life is Delicious. Before we get started, I just wanted to ask you a quick question. How many times this week did you say yes to things that you really wanted to say no to? And how many times did you accommodate someone else's wishes so that they would stay comfortable? Well, in fact, you were not. The reason I ask is because this has become a very common situation for women who overfunction, especially when we have a lot on our plate. So if you feel like you've been overfunctioning or people-pleasing or maybe just doing more than you actually feel like you can do happily, I've created something just for you. It's called the 5-Day Midlife Boundary Reset. It's a 5-day email program where we do some quick resets that help to rewire the fear of disappointing others, and it helps us stop disappointing ourselves. Join me over at lifeisdelicious.ca, where it's free to sign up, and it will really give you some quick inspiration for getting your boundaries back on track. There are moments in life, especially in midlife, when something begins to shift. Maybe it's a transition or a change in identity. A quiet realization that the life you've been living is ready to expand. And often what follows is the question, what would it look like to do something just for me? Not for your family, for your responsibilities, or for who you've always been, but for the woman that you're becoming. And sometimes that answer looks like travel. Not the rushed, overpacked, checkbox kind of travel, but something deeper. A journey that allows you to reconnect with yourself, to build confidence, to trust your instincts again, to remember that you are capable, strong, and far more adventurous than you may think. And yes, to do it in a way that feels safe, supported, and empowering. Because solo travel doesn't have to mean being alone. It can mean being guided, held, and surrounded by the right people in the right places. And that's exactly what we're talking about today. I'm joined by Regina Winkle Bryan, the founder of Bold Spirit Travel, and she is a true powerhouse in the world of women's travel. She and her incredible team are helping women step out into the world with courage, confidence, and a sense of adventure, creating experiences that are not only safe, but truly transformational. So if you've been standing at the edge of something new, or if you've been feeling that pull toward adventure, or maybe you're in a season of transition and wondering what's next, consider this your invitation. Welcome to this episode of Life is Delicious. I'm Marnie Martin, and I'm so glad you're here. And if this is your first time here, welcome to the Life is Delicious family. This podcast isn't about surviving midlife. It's about crafting your next chapter life, overflowing with purpose, joy, and delicious possibilities. Listen, midlife doesn't have to be a crisis. It can be a beautiful invitation to remember who we are, to rediscover a new version of ourselves, or to completely reinvent our life to reflect who we are becoming now. So if you're tired of being exhausted, living life on autopilot, and putting everyone else first, then you are in the right place. Each week, we'll bring you thought-provoking ideas and practical strategies, as well as inspiration to help you prioritize yourself again. It's time to take back your joie de vivre. So grab a notebook and pen and pop in those earbuds, and let's go get it. Welcome, Regina, to the Life is Delicious podcast. I'm so grateful to have you here today.
Thank you for having me on the show. I'm looking forward to it.
I think what you do is so fascinating, and I know my listeners are going to be super excited to hear about your story and what you offer to your clients. So if you would be so kind, tell us a little bit about how you got into the business of Bold Spirit Travel, and why did you decide to turn it into a business?
Yes, well, no one will be surprised that I love to travel and have for many years, but really connecting the dots, I think we can trace Bold Spirit back to taking a Spanish class when I was in my early 20s and really wanting to learn Spanish, not for any particular reason, but I was very determined to do it, and I wasn't very good at it. In fact, I was pretty bad at it. and went to traditional classes at the university and just was not getting it. And I thought, I know what I'll do. I'll go and I'll be immersed in the language, and that way I'm going to get it. I'm going to learn Spanish. So I signed up and I went to learn Spanish in Costa Rica for a few months. And I lived with a family. They spoke no English. I realized just how bad my Spanish really was on a daily basis. And maybe I learned some Spanish while I was there. I don't know. Mostly what I learned was that I loved to travel and that I could do it by myself, and before that trip, I was pretty anxious about it. And I remember doing all kinds of research but I went alone. And it was great. And so that led me to go back to Costa Rica later and live there for quite a while. And then eventually moved to Guatemala, and I lived there for 2 years. And then I moved to Spain, to Barcelona, and probably listeners are thinking, well, that's Catalonia. That's not Spain. So that's a different podcast. But yes, I moved to Catalonia, and I lived there for 10 years. So
that's incredible.
Well, yeah, it was a long trajectory, and about 13 years. And that is enough time to learn Spanish, it turns out. I did.
Finally. So were you working, or what was the draw to go to Costa Rica? I mean, obviously learning Spanish was one of the reasons, but there must have been something else that kind of drew you to seeing new things.
Well, I think you and I are both from the same part of the world, right? We're both on the Pacific side of the Pacific Northwest. So I got to say, one part was that I just wanted to get out of the rain. I was tired of being in the rainy Pacific Northwest, which is where I'm from. And it's where I live now, and it's beautiful, of course. But and I was younger, and I was restless and wanted to see the world. That was part of it too. The language thing, I don't know why I was so stuck on that. I really didn't have much of a reason other than, it obviously opened all kinds of doors. In fact, I don't know that I would have started Bold Spirit all these years later had I not learned Spanish, because it just opened up a whole new life for me eventually. So Costa Rica, I was a student at that point, but then, I did end up working in Guatemala. And then, of course, I worked while I was in Barcelona. I worked as a journalist for a while in Barcelona, and I would write about interesting travel experiences that I had. So one of them was doing the Camino de Santiago. Some of you probably have heard of that. It's a pilgrimage trail that mostly cuts across Spain. That's the best known path. It's called the French Way. Anyways, I did part of that, and then I wrote a story about it for a magazine. And it was quite important and transformational. And I honestly, I've never had another travel experience quite like the Camino. I think that's why it is quite popular and people love it, and they kind of get into it, and then they go back year after year and do other trails on the Camino because it's so special. So I did that. And then, years later when I started Bold Spirit, that was one of the first trips that we offered was the Camino.
Because you were familiar with it, obviously.
Exactly. And it had been this really important travel moment for me, and I knew I wanted to share it with other women. We take people to Costa Rica. Well, that's because Costa Rica has a special place in my heart. I lived there for quite a while. So when I first started, it was places I knew and places I really wanted to share with other women travelers.
That's fascinating. And I love that you had said that the Camino was one of your first sort of really impactful travel experiences. I have a girlfriend that's going in about 3 weeks, and my other girlfriend went about 3 years ago. And so she's been inspired by her, and just recently retired and decided she's just going to take herself and go have a time to learn about who she is again in this new chapter. So what was the most impactful thing that you found about being on the Camino? What was that for you?
You are in Spain for the most part. It starts in different places, but most of the walking usually takes place in Spain. But it feels like something else. It's its own bubble because there are people from all over the world on the Camino, from Japan, from Australia, from, other places in Europe. So you're walking along and you're in the Spanish culture, Galician culture, but at the same time, you're interacting with all these other cultures. And it's just kind of unusual to have all these different people from all these different countries walking the same path at the same time and sharing their stories. And the nature of the Camino is that you're walking so much that you're going to start talking to people because, people are friendly and frankly, you're seeing each other all the time. It's slow travel. You're just on your own 2 feet. So you're going to get to know people. And I think it's really unique in that way. I haven't ever been on another trip where I met so many different people, all with a similar goal. To kind of piggyback on what you said about your friend, thinking about, well, what am I doing now in my life? A new chapter. You see that quite a bit on the Camino. You see people seeking it out because they want some sort of answer, or they want time to think and be with themselves and their thoughts, So that could be a new chapter because of retirement, or sometimes it's something like divorce, or just starting a different job, leaving a job, starting something new, empty nesting, of course, a loss of a loved one. But and some people just do it for the fun of doing the Camino, and they want something active and, challenge themselves physically. But often it calls to a certain kind of person who wants that introspection and the spiritual aspect of it. And I don't mean necessarily Catholicism, although it is a Catholic pilgrimage trail. The majority of people on it are not Catholic. Certainly some are, but it's really people of all faiths are walking the Camino.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I love that. And I think my audience certainly a lot of my audience is in probably one of those demographics that you just spoke about. So I think it's really interesting. And so that's a good starting point for sure. But obviously that continued into more and doing more travel. So tell me a little bit more about how your business evolved from that place.
Yes, well, we just do a small group, all women trips. So we started with the Camino, and I think we started with Italy. And then we've just been I say we because I have a small team. We've just been building ever since. And actually, as you and I are recording this, we have a group in Iceland right now, and they're going to an ice cave and, all kinds of cool stuff. Again, a place that I visited a couple times as a journalist, as a matter of fact, and just really loved it. And so
Very
definitely
cool.
wanted to offer Iceland. And what has developed over the years is, and it was always the intention to connect women through adventure, but the community building part has become more and more important to me. Most of the women on our trips, they come alone. Sometimes they'll come with a friend, but mostly they come alone. And so recognizing that it's really kind of frightening to go on a trip by yourself, especially if you've never done it before, with a bunch of people whom you've never met, and all the old stuff that, maybe is from childhood comes up, where am I going to fit in? What's it going to be like? What will the other women be like? That comes up. One of the questions I get most is, what's the age range? Once a week, somebody will ask me that. But I guess my point is that there are so many of us out there who want to travel solo. We want women who want to travel alone. For whatever reason, we're not going to go with our friends or our spouse or whoever. And we're ready to go. And there's a lot of us out there. And so joining a group is a great way to build community with other women who also want to do this. You might have tons of friends back home, and none of them want to go and walk the Camino with you, or go to Iceland, or hike in the Highlands of Scotland. That's something else we do. They don't want to do that. But guess what? There's a bunch of other people who do. So building this community of like-minded women travelers who hopefully will stay in touch after the trip and guests will be able to get together later. Maybe they do a different trip or they go and see each other if they live in different states and do small trips together or small hikes. That's really what's most important to me. It's what makes me happiest is when that happens.
Yeah, that's such an awesome thing because I think for a lot of us, when we get to this place in life, there is a lot of transition, and certainly you do have, those moments where somebody has lost a spouse, or there's so much transition. But having said that, what a beautiful blessing to be able to connect with other women that are in the same space as you and can build lifetime friendships.
Exactly. Yeah. And I would say most of the women who come on our trips are between the age of maybe 45, 50 to 70, 75. So some shared experiences there that these women have. And I've seen lots of friendships come out of our trips, and many guests who come multiple times on multiple trips. We love them. And
of course.
It speaks to, I think, how wonderful the guides are, first of all, because we employ wonderful women tour leaders. And that's important too, that we're supporting each other. So it's not just the fact that this is a woman-owned business. It's also the women who are leading the tours in Italy and Iceland right now. And, the women drivers and restaurant owners. So it's actually participating in a trip like this is uplifting women in tourism all over the world. So that's part of it too. It's many, many layered.
I love that. That's like a mission unto itself, to connect women and to be able to support women and to be able to bring business to women-owned, establishments. That's fantastic. I love that on so many levels. So let's dig into maybe what are some of the obstacles that you find that people come up with for not doing solo travel? Like, what are some of the things? Do you have to work through stuff with people sometimes? Like, do you get a lot of questions?
I think so. Yeah, I think it's normal. And I'm like that too. If I haven't done something before and then I do a lot of research, that helps me. That's one of the ways that I can prepare for something new. So I love talking to people on the phone, especially if it's their first trip. We have travelers who have been to many countries and are very experienced, and they are coming with us because they would like to have community, meet some new friends, and also have somebody take care of logistics for them, which is a big part of it. But we also have people who, I just spoke to somebody the other day, she's never been out of the country on her own. And I think it was going to be her first trip to Europe. And it's daunting. Once you do it, it's like, oh, okay, I can do this. I can do this again. But you don't know what you don't know. So I get a lot of questions. And we also offer classes about travel pretty frequently. So some of them are free. Some of them are, we charge a ticket depending on what they are. We just did one the other day that was not so much travel, but it was with a woman who, she's quite inspiring. People should can contact me if they'd like to see the replay. But she is an American and she moved to Portugal and 4 years ago, and alone, single woman. She's retired, and we had a class all about how she moved to Portugal and what that was like. And you can imagine there were a lot of questions. So she's next level. There's a jump between, doing your first solo trip and then moving to Portugal on your own. But
100%, yeah.
As we were talking, she mentioned that she didn't go on her first solo trip abroad until she was over 40.
Wow.
And now she is a world traveler and lives on her own, moved to Portugal. So anyhow, we do a lot of those classes. I do one that's called Pack Like a Pro, great for any traveler who overpacks, or maybe you just want some tips on great gear, how to do a capsule wardrobe, luggage. So
that's great. I love that. And it's really, we could probably have 2 or 3 podcast episodes just covering all of it. But let's dig into maybe some tips on what would be your top 5 packing tips for people that have never really done this on their own, but they now have to go, okay, I have to really be a little bit mindful of what I'm going to put in my suitcase and what I'm going to bring with me.
Right. Well, first of all, you want to check and see how much weight you can actually bring. And usually it's 50 pounds if you're traveling from North America. But, well, I would say I love the idea of the capsule wardrobe, which I've got to admit that I came too late in life, but now it's one of the ways that I pack. So for those who don't know what that is, it's basically you choose one or two colors. So I always do black and white. So if you see pictures of me traveling, I'm probably wearing something black and white.
I love
But
that too.
so you all black pants, and then you've got a few shirts, and everything that you have can go with everything else. And then you have a couple of scarves; those don't take up too much space, and so that lets you bring fewer items but have several outfits. And then I would say break in your shoes. Mostly we go to Europe, so that's kind of the lens through which I'm looking at this for packing. So people think, I'm going to wear my really cute shoes for my spring trip to Europe. Great idea, but make sure you've broken those in big time before you leave.
Because you're going to be doing a lot of walking.
Yeah, and that's another tip is if you don't walk much at home, then the month before you're going to go on your trip, or maybe even 2 months, start walking, put your Fitbit on, and, do 5 miles a couple times a week. How does that feel? Because in Europe, you can easily do 20,000 steps in a day without even trying, right? Because it's just so walkable. It depends on where you're going to be. I'm thinking European cities, right? Let's say you're going to Rome or Barcelona. That's an easy goal to accomplish, 20,000 steps. So if you're not used to that, then do a bit of training and wear the shoes that you're going to wear while you're on your trip.
That's a great tip. I love that because, I think being comfortable on your feet is probably the most important thing for being able to enjoy your surroundings, right?
Yes, absolutely. And having the right shoes for uneven surface ways. I'm just thinking, so one of the trips we go on is the Amalfi Coast in Italy, and we visit an archaeological site. We do this in Sicily as well and in Greece. Archaeological sites are uneven or cobblestones, so you want to have the right shoes for that. You're not just wearing some kind of flip-flops. So look into what your itinerary is and make sure you have the right gear. Of course, we always give everybody a packing list before our trips. The other thing would be to split up your money and your credit cards. So don't put all your eggs in one basket. And I always take out cash before a trip. So if you're going to the Amalfi Coast, then you would, let's say you take out 300 euros, split it in half. So if something happens to your purse, you still have backup money. You still have a backup debit card. You're not, completely out of luck.
That's a great tip.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it makes sense, right? And same thing with your important documents. You want to make a copy or take pictures of those. So that if something were to happen, you're separated from them for whatever reason, you have a copy. I also say beware of putting everything on your phone because we all rely so much on our phones these days. You got your Apple Pay and all your plane tickets are on there, and maybe you've booked some activities. All those tickets are on there. I had a woman who accidentally dropped it in a toilet, didn't work for the rest of her vacation.
Oh, no.
And then that's that.
Right.
So
that makes
you now have no access to any of your documents.
Awfully complicated trip.
Right. So have a backup. Where else can you put those documents? Maybe you go old school and print some important items off,
What I love about what you do with people and these tips that you're giving us is because I've actually never been to Europe, and that's definitely on the top of my bucket list. But the interesting thing is, I think the first time you go anywhere, I remember when I even went to an all-inclusive for the very first time. The first time I went, I found that there was just so many things I didn't know until about a week in. And then I was like, I wish somebody'd give me like a cheat sheet. When you go, you got to find the board that has all the stuff and, all the little things. And then I was like, I could write a little, thing on how to do it more effectively so you don't waste so much time. And I would imagine it's very similar with what you do, because when people go with someone who's done it before, you're not bumbling around trying to find where the best restaurant is, or you've got all of that extra knowledge that just kind of fast tracks you to doing the trip in a way that's more efficient and more enjoyable.
Absolutely. And many of us are very busy. I'm sure many of your listeners in midlife, they've got jobs, they've maybe have kids, they're taking care of their parents or whatever. People have a lot going on. And sometimes it's really fun to plan a trip. And sometimes it's like, I cannot do one more thing.
Yeah,
I cannot
exactly.
do all the research for this.
Yeah.
So just hire somebody to do it. And maybe that looks like coming on a trip with us and we're going to take care of you. Or maybe you hire a travel advisor and they take care of it for you. You don't have to do it all yourself. And like a lot of things in life, it can be really advantageous to hire an expert.
Because the whole point is it's supposed to be an enjoyable experience. And I would imagine, there's probably been times where people have gone on and, they think it's going to be an adventure and it ends up being rather complicated, or they do something that was probably taboo, or maybe they didn't know not to go to that part of town or whatever that is. And then it changes the whole dynamic of their experience.
Yeah, and I think that's important as solo women travelers too. It is important to think about what part of town you're going to stay in. I do a lot of research about that when I'm going to a new place, if I'm staying in a big city. And that's hours of my time trying to figure out, will this be safe? Will I be able to walk? How will I feel in this area or this hotel? So having somebody who's already figured all that out for you makes a difference if you're going to Rome or Naples or Madrid or whatever. We sometimes have groups of friends. Like I said, it's not very often. Mostly it's solo women travelers, but I've had this a couple of times. And if you've ever tried to travel with your whole family or with a group of close friends, it sounds like a lot of fun, and it can be. Somebody is doing all the planning. And that somebody may or may not be resentful at the end of the day. And then you've got to get everybody to say, well, I want to go out to this restaurant or I want to do this activity, and you got to get everybody on board, herding cats. So when you go on an organized trip, there's no, you don't need to go over it a million times because the itinerary is already set. So the friend groups who we've had have really liked that because they just show up and they're taken care of. Their whole group is taken care of. Of course, if people don't want to do all the activities, they don't have to. Mostly they do. But I think it reduces conflict and stress.
As we all know, life isn't always delicious. And one of the only constants we have in life is that things are always changing. Life can be a beautiful mess of twists and turns. And as we grow through each unique season of life, our needs change, our goals change, our priorities change, and our responsibilities change. And sometimes when the really hard stuff shows up, as it inevitably will, we can find ourselves lost and without a clear direction. Sometimes that can happen when we've had a huge life transition, like a divorce or a diagnosis, or we realize that our babies are all grown up and ready to be out on their own. And sometimes it can be a subtle or not so subtle restlessness that tells us we're ready to step into a bigger, bolder, more authentic version of ourselves. But one thing is for sure, we can't transition into what's next happily until we get really clear about what's weighing us down, what lights us up, and what we truly want when our soul whispers its truth. Happy is Not an Accident is a guided journal created to bring you back home to your truest self, to remember who you are, and to give you a safe place to explore and reflect on where you've been, where you really want to go, and who you want to become now. With deep, inspiring prompts, thought-provoking questions, and powerful exercises to help you excavate your most authentic self, Happy is Not an Accident will be the daily ritual that you look forward to as you step into this next awesome chapter of life. Give yourself the gift of self-reflection and create this beautiful life of yours on purpose and with intention. Get your copy or one for somebody that you love at lifeisdelicious.ca/happy. I agree because I think, I just saw a post actually on social media somewhere and it had the 5 types of friends who travel. And there's always one who's the planner and one who's, needs to nap a lot and like all the different personalities because everybody's idea of what's relaxing or what's adventurous is very different.
Absolutely. Right. Somebody wants to go to the market. Somebody else just wants to chill by the pool.
Yeah, exactly.
So you sign up for a group trip and it's like, well, this is what we're doing. And there's a little bit of everything, built in so that it's attractive for most people. And it's been real successful. We had a group that they were celebrating 30 years of friendship. And I thought that was such a beautiful idea. First of all, that they've been friends for so long and still, really close. And that they would book a trip specifically to celebrate each other and how much they love each other.
I love that. I love that so much. So of all the trips that you have taken, like just give us your top 5 destinations that you would suggest people look at first if they've never tackled travel solo or even leaving the country for that matter.
Well, it kind of depends on what you want. Like, as we were saying, do you want a beach trip or do you want something that's, very adventurous where you're hiking and you're, out in the wilderness kind of thing? So there's that question. But I think if it's your first trip abroad, as far as the trips that we offer, I've seen that the Amalfi Coast trip is quite popular, as is, I would say Portugal would be another one that's really good. I like these trips because if you're a new traveler, you can fly directly to the destination and we're going to pick you up. So for example, with Portugal, you fly to Lisbon and we're going to pick you up there and the logistics are really easy. So I would say, Portugal is a great place to start. It's sunny. People are friendly. People in the big cities speak English. If you're worried about language, of course, Scotland would be a great option. We do a hiking trip in Scotland. People have to be pretty fit for that. But I think, Costa Rica is good because you're not dealing with jet lag. So that's something going over to Europe, most people are going to have jet lag. There's a few lucky ones out there who they don't get jet lag.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever had jet lag, but I'm looking forward to maybe having some one day.
You're going to be having jet lag, Marnie, pretty soon.
Yes.
Where do you want to go first?
Well, Italy's on the top of my bucket list for sure, but I've heard so many good things about Portugal, and I'm more of the interest of just being in sort of the small towns with the locals and just, and I'm a wine rep too, so I'm always really interested in particular countries that have great wine and the way they do it differently than the way we do here. So that's a neat thing for me too.
Well, that would be Portugal could be quite interesting in that respect for you too, then, because their wines are in the north. They have the wine region up there, and you've got the Vino Verde. But of course, Italy, I don't know. That's a toss-up right there. I'm not sure.
I know.
Can't go wrong.
Exactly.
Well, you could go over and do a week in one place and a week in the other.
There you go. Well, that's awesome. I appreciate that. Well, tell us, what kind of trips do you have coming up for solo travelers? And maybe give us a couple of different options for all the different personalities. So somebody that maybe wants something a little more adventurous or a little bit more, they're fitter and they want something like that. Or maybe a little more laid back on the beach and then maybe, a little bit more exploring.
Oh, I like this. It's like match the personality type. So if you are somebody who's quite fit and you want a active vacation, I would say come do the Camino with us in September of this year. We'll do it next year too in 2027, but we're going to be doing the classic French way. So that's the way that you've seen in the movies. If you read a book about the Camino, it's probably about the French way. It's really beautiful and has a lot of services, which makes it attractive to people. So we're doing that in September. You're going to have to walk about 10 miles a day, but it's only for 7 days. And then we also do a hiking trip they're both in September. Why? Because it's really good weather for hiking. We don't want to be too hot when we're hiking. We also go to Scotland at that time and we hike in the wilderness, in the Highlands. It's more rugged hiking, whereas Camino is more walking. And we do something where we do a cold plunge into a lake, which is called a loch, and then we go into a sauna, and it's just a really cool trip. It's so beautiful. It's a
That
lot
sounds
like
great.
where we live, Marnie, up in the Pacific Northwest. It's
Okay. So
cooler and green and
yeah, the landscape's very similar.
and the weather.
Nice.
And then if you are somebody who loves the beach and water and you want to go swimming and that vibe, then I would say come to the Greek islands. We go to Athens, which is obviously the mainland, but we also go to Naxos and to Santorini. That's in September. So lots
Lovely.
of options to swim there, and also history, of course. And the Amalfi Coast in Italy is also on the water. And as a matter of fact, we go to an island. Hopefully people have heard of this island, although most people haven't. It's called Ischia, and it's right next to the island of Capri. Most people have heard of Capri.
Yeah.
Ischia is covered with thermal spas, natural thermal water that's bubbling up. And so we spend the whole day at a beautiful spa on the beach on an island. It's really cool.
Is it like a hot springs of sorts?
It's a hot springs, but much more elevated than like your hot springs in the woods kind of thing. This is a resort with, I don't know, they must have 10 or 15 pools of varying temperatures. They have a wine grotto and a bistro and a private beach with sun loungers. It's quite luxurious.
That sounds like it's going to be on the top of my list for sure.
It's a highlight for a lot of our guests, and for me, I love that place. And then if you love wine and food and culture, I would say Portugal. So maybe for the woman traveler who loves a city, loves some great shopping, and also history and art.
Wine. And wine.
Yes, and wine.
Wine and art and food, they just kind of go together, right?
Yeah, so that's more of an active cultural city escape, although we do go to some small villages, whereas I would say the Greek islands, it's more laid back. With a little dose of Athens. Athens is a big city, so, you got a little bit of everything in there.
That's awesome. Well, thank you for sharing some of your wisdom today. My goodness, I think it sounds like the most perfect job in the whole wide world, and I don't know why I didn't think of that sooner.
It's a pretty fun job, and getting to work with our guests and our wonderful guides is a gift, and I'm often just blown away by how amazing people are. You never know what their stories are, and I love learning about our guests and being inspired and learning from our guides.
Yeah, and I would imagine probably, especially if you're seeing some travelers come back year after year, how great those friendships are and how wonderful it is to be a part of everyone's life and their happiness excursions.
Yes, exactly. Getting to be part of something that enriches people's lives, and seeing this trajectory for some where, a client who has never left the country, and then I talked to her 3 years later and she's been to 25 countries, just seeing that change is really fun for me.
Oh, I bet.
Yeah.
Oh, that's good. Well, hopefully I'll be one of those people.
I see it for you.
Yeah, I have to get out there for sure. But no, it's been so great. So before we wrap up, please do tell us where people can connect with you on the socials and on your website. And I will put all those links in the show notes as well.
Yes, find us over at boldspirittravel.com. And we're also on Instagram and Facebook. I'm here as I said, in the Pacific Northwest, so in that time zone, and I love talking to people on the phone, so don't hesitate to call if you have questions or just want to know more about what it's like to travel with a group for the first time. Thanks so much for having me on. Really appreciate it.
I hope you enjoyed today's episode. I hope it inspired you or motivated you in some way to keep going and to create your very best life. If you did, would you take 5 quick minutes to leave me a review on Apple Podcasts? It's the best way for me to know that you are enjoying the show, and it helps other listeners find me as well. And while you're at it, head over to lifeisdelicious.ca and sign up for my email newsletter. It's like a warm hug from me every week, and not only will you get first access to new episodes, I've also put together a free 5-day email experience called the Midlife Boundary Reset, where you'll get 5 days of insights, mindset shifts, and daily journal prompts to help you gently start choosing yourself again and create better boundaries without guilt, drama, or burning bridges. I've put the link in the show notes as well, and I think you're going to love it. One last thing, if you know someone who would enjoy an episode like this, please do them a favor and share it with them. It's the best gift you can give someone that you love. If no one has told you today, there is no one on this planet that is exactly like you. And this world is a better place because you're here. So thank you for being here. I'll be back next week, and I hope you'll join me right here on Life is Delicious.